Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Science of Spirit. And today I thought I would take a little bit of a different direction. I did a channeling session one day, and I had asked where our country was going as far as our financial system. And I got some interesting information that I really didn't expect, which I will go into here in just a little bit. But it also kind of sent me down the trail of finding out what this whole Nesara thing was about, because there are a few people talking about it, actually quite a few people talking about it. So I decided to look into this and see what was going on. So actually I found it on Wikipedia, and it is actually a real thing. It was something that was conceived back in the 90s by a man, a Dr. Barnhard. So bear with me a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and read what Wikipedia has to say. The National Economic Security and Recovery Act, known as Nesara, was a set of proposed economic reforms for the United States suggested during the 1990s by Harvey Francis Barnhard. Barnhard claimed that the proposals, which included replacing the income tax with a national sales tax, abolishing compound interest on secured loans, and returning to a bimetallic currency, would result in 0% inflation and a more stable economy. The proposals were never introduced before Congress. Now, this was then kind of hijacked by someone who then put a lot of embellishments on it, and I'm not going to really get into all that. You can look it up if you're interested in finding out more about it. And other information I found on this was that Dr. Barnard's Nesara would abolish the Federal Reserve System and replace it with a new Treasury Reserve System with a mandate of maintaining a stable currency of gold and silver coins and gold and silver certificates. With debt-free currency, there would be no debt being created that is owed to private entities. The income tax would be eliminated, taxing consumption instead with a sales tax of 14%. Many items would be exempt, such as government-mandated expenses like licenses and permits, essentials like food, medical expenses, housing, livestock, insurance, and labor, and anything that is a non-profit in nature. Dr. Barnard was a Louisiana State University graduate in systems philosophy and an engineering consultant and teacher. He printed 1,000 copies of this proposal in the 1990s, titling it Draining the Swamp, Monetary and Fiscal Policy Reform, 1996, and sent copies to members of Congress, believing it would pass quickly on its merits, based on a theory that debt is the number one economic factor inhibiting the growth of the economy, and compound interest is the number one moral evil and reason for debt. Apparently this was never really passed, but I find it interesting because he also established the Nesara Institute in 2001 and published the second edition of his book in 2005, retitling it Draining the Swamp, the Nesara Story, Monetary and Fiscal Policy Reform. So, okay, I'm done reading, but I wanted to read that because I thought a few things about this were really quite interesting. Obviously, the Draining the Swamp name, gee, where have you heard that before? Interesting. And this was proposed back in the 90s. Also, at the beginning of this year, the Federal Reserve was taken into the Treasury. Just saying. Interesting stuff. But also, let me read to you what my higher self had to say about some other things. Now, I didn't ask about Nesara specifically. I just wanted to know where the USA was going with financial stuff. So here's what I got from that channeling session. At the moment, there is a general consensus on moving towards the gold standard, but with ideas put forth to radically change the monetary system. The primary purpose is to give Americans a fighting chance for prosperity. The new money system, will be a way to project the feelings of wealth upon the nation, thus making it so. Rally cries for a form of exchange that is debt-free for all. The system will lean towards ample amounts for everyone who is working or who has worked here in the USA. I asked if credit card debt would be wiped out, and it said it will be reformed at first and brought into a system based in the US. Possible interest-free loans and such. IRS is being taken down. When Trump wins, a conscious wave will envelop the planet with feelings of joy and hope. So it seems to me that we are really ushering in a new way of living. I think the majority of people on the planet want to bring in more joy and more abundance, and are tired of a system that is based on not enough and lack of, when that's not really the reality. So it does sound like something like this Nesara could be being implemented, or in some version of that. It would certainly be a much better way of going, I think, than what's there, because right now, everything is based on lack. Lack of this. Don't have enough money. It's always lack, lack, lack. There's not enough to go around, which really is not true. It's based on that. I mean, if you really stop and think about this, the Federal Reserve was implemented back in, I think, 1914. And there is the same type of version of the Federal Reserve, I think, in most other countries, too. But the Federal Reserve was put forth by they're a private bank. They're not actually owned by the United States. And so they came along and said, hey, we'll print your money, but we're going to charge you interest. Well, I mean, who thinks that's a good idea? But obviously, whoever was president at that time, which haven't looked into all this stuff, must have been going along with that story, because otherwise, why would you even do that? So, for example, let's say you borrow $1,000 of this money that's being printed. Well, okay, now they're going to charge you interest. Well, where are you going to get the money to pay the interest? Yeah, so it just snowballs. You borrow, let's say, $1,000, and let's say you owe $1,050. Where are you going to get the other $50? You're going to have to borrow more, and so on and so on and so on. And it's based on not enough. There's not enough, which is a very negative form of energy, I would say. But if you base something on prosperity for everybody, I mean, because technically, think about this, with the way things are with finance, it's all done digitally. I mean, you could just type in pretty much whatever amount you want and it would be there. There's not actually anything to back it up, not really. Now, if they implement the gold standard, I don't know how that's going to work in conjunction with digital type currency, or if it even would be. It may still be, physical paper money. I don't know. But, anything that's leaning into more of people coming together and of more of an unlimited amount of money, that really creates the prosperity, because I kind of was wrapping my head around the idea of, what if everybody had unlimited money? Imagine how radical that would be, how different things would change. Now, yeah, of course, I haven't worked this whole thing out. It was just an idea in my head. But if everybody had unlimited funds, it almost makes money not needed in a weird kind of way. Because let's say someone has $1 million house they're going to put up for sale. And I come along and I've got unlimited money, so I can just buy that $1 million house. Well, why would they care necessarily? Because they've got unlimited money too. So it almost comes down to, okay, I don't want to live here anymore. If you want to live here, I'll just sign you over the contract. And there's a lot of other weirdness around that. Obviously, if everyone had unlimited money, there'd be a lot of jobs that nobody would want to do. And so you'd have to work out stuff like that. But at least it's something interesting to think about. And there is a guy named Michael Tellinger who has proposed a world without actually using money, but starting out using money to then get off the money. And so it's kind of similar to my thought of having unlimited money. It just makes it sort of a moot point. It's like, well, we're just kind of trading your money for my money and whatever. And his project is called the Ubuntu Project, and he's from South Africa. But you can find him all over YouTube. He has some interesting insights into how that whole thing would start. But with him, it was basically using a grassroots project where all of us would get together and decide to implement this without having the government in on it. But if you have something where the government's actually like, hey, yeah, let's, we're going to do something that's prosperous for everybody, then you could do something a little more aggressive and not maybe even have to take as long to do it. I don't know. Those are just some thoughts of mine. So, if you have any other ideas on this, let me know, because I'm not by any means any kind of an expert. I was just sort of toying with these ideas and channeled some information on it that I thought was interesting, especially the part about getting rid of the IRS. So if the IRS goes away, in my opinion, that would be phenomenal. So it sounds like something really cool may be in store, and then hopefully other countries will do the same, and the whole world can be in a better position. Now, I also channeled something else that has absolutely nothing to do with that. When I do these channeling sessions, I ask all kinds of stuff, and a lot of it's just unrelated. So I end up with all this information that's just, all kinds of stuff all over the place. And I try to categorize it, but it's getting a little out of hand. So anyway, I did ask about the border wall. In this country, we put up this border wall. This wall between Mexico and the United States is pretty much finished. And I asked, is there some other reason for this wall other than just, physically, a physical barrier to keep people from being trafficked over here or just illegally coming into the country? And I got this. Necessity. It is built to keep out others by a tall grid that is vertical. It slows transverse lines to keep out unwanted projections from other space weapons. This type of configuration is meant to block out other types of entities crossing by way of plane or underground. It is just part of a grid system being reenacted from space and other logistical areas within the land and sea as well as space. So I would have to ask more about that. I have no idea what that is, but it definitely sounds like something other than just a wall to keep people from, easily going back and forth, or at least being trafficked. And I do think that the human trafficking problem is way, way, way bigger than anybody really ever thought could happen. And I think when that gets exposed, people will finally understand why we have been living in such a negative world. So anyway, I thought I would share all of that information, and especially the money stuff, because I thought it was something kind of hopeful and interesting to look forward to. Now, as you know, here in the U.S., we just had our election, and it's pretty much chaos, which is kind of what I expected. I didn't think this was going to go easily necessarily. But if it had been just a landslide, in Trump's favor, all this corruption wouldn't be being addressed. So this election fraud and so forth that's going on it's another thing that needs to be addressed. And of course, it's just more and more chaos, but it needs to be dealt with. So it is what it is. I am going to maintain that Trump is going to remain president. This is basically what my higher self has said for a long time. Initially, in 2016, I didn't know anything about him. I had no idea. And I kind of just thought he was part of the same club of corruption. And so I had to ask through channeling, what was going on. So I found out that he and his team are really trying to get rid of all the corruption that's everywhere. And they're up against quite a bit, but I think they will prevail. And I should say we will prevail. So with all this turmoil that's going on, trying to maintain a higher vibe as best you can is the best thing you could be doing. The more positive vibration you can put out there and aim it at the planet, the better. If you haven't heard my podcast on lighting the earth, that's what should be being done, and it will make a huge difference. Because we really are up against a lot of negativity, especially right now, and I think most people can feel it. But you can definitely counter it. So I really recommend everybody everywhere be doing it, because this isn't just for the United States. It will end up being for the whole world. So send light to the earth every day, as many times as you can per day, and it will definitely have an effect, a big effect. So thank you so much for listening. Until next time, this is Janice for the Science of Spirit. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe and share my channel. Also, this podcast can be heard on Breaker, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, and Spotify. Thank you for listening.